Welcome to another Motor Week. On this week's show, Richard Hammond shows off the new Subaru Impreza and sees if it's any match against the old one. Ian Royle sees why one of the rarest Hondas on our road is his used car tip of the week. And Ken Gibson goes Bond style when he drives the BMW Z8 and X5. But before that, let's catch up with Richard, who's giving us the lowdown on the Rav4 for its 10,000 mile test.
When you're reporting on new cars, it can be easy to miss stuff when you just leap off a plane and are handed the keys to a test car. Okay, you can tell if it's hyper fast or if it handles like a piano, and it's fairly obvious if it's plug ugly like a warthog's privates caught in a mangle or if it's built as sturdily as a paper aeroplane. But to find out what a car is really like to live with takes a little bit longer. And that's one of the advantages of being on air 52 weeks of the year, because we can hang on to a car for that little bit longer and really find out what it's all about. I've been living with this Toyota Rav4 now for what, 3 months, and it's racked up just over 9,000 miles. So we've got to know one another pretty well. Very well, in fact, because during that time I've become a father and we've moved house. So we've been through a lot together already. Come on, out the way. The new Rav4 arrived in August 2000, and it had a lot to do if it was going to live up to the reputation of its predecessor, because that was the car that really launched the new generation of soft roaders, cars with chunky 4x4 looks and all the practicality of a larger body, but with close to hatchback performance. In the case of the original Rav4 though, it was close to hot hatch performance. If I've learned just one thing in my time with the Toyota Rav4, it's to bury some of my prejudice against soft roaders. Because yeah, they do get a bit of a rough press sometimes. But when you just need a car to get you and friends or family from one place to another with all their kit, they start to make an awful lot of sense. There's actually been loads of times when I've had some pretty exotic cars lurking about on the drive. But just to make a trip into town, I've reached the keys for this, the Rav4, just because it's so easy. And I learned an awful lot about the practical side of the Rav4 when it came to moving house. And it does mean there is an amazing load space at the back, and it's all quite flat and accessible. But there is one big problem here, and it's a bit of a niggle, I've got to say. This tailgate, great idea opening sideways. You wouldn't want to lift it up over your head with the weight of the spare wheel on it. But look at the size of the gap. And as I found out, yeah, you can get an armchair in the back, but you want to try getting it in. Not easy. But here's something to compensate, and I haven't told the people at Toyota this yet. I was reversing out of a supermarket car park, and this bollard, it just leapt and, well, I hit it. Thing is, there was a massive noise, so I jumped out the car expecting to see the whole of the thing crumpled up at the front like a student's Visa card bill. But in fact, all I got was this. Just some scuffing. This plastic moulding in the bumper had protected the whole of the car. So all I'm going to do is get the thing sprayed in at its first service, and Toyota need never know. Apart from the fact I've just put it on the telly. Oops. But while I am finding faults with Boogie, as my other half has called this car, for some inexplicable reason, one of the other little niggles is fuel consumption. It does struggle to do particularly well. Can't give you the accurate figures because I messed up my calculations. I'll do that next time we come back to this car. Suffice it to say they're not that good. But I guess that's just the price you pay for having a 4x4 with performance pretensions. I can't tell you yet about servicing and such, because it hasn't had its first service yet. That's due at 10,000 miles, which is kind of a quick check over. I know that Toyotas aren't exactly cheap to work on, but the upside is they very rarely break anyway. Its proper service will then come up at 20,000 miles, so we'll see what happens. Certainly nothing untoward has occurred to Boogie so far, so I'm not expecting to be too badly stung when we do hit that 10 or 20,000 mile barrier.
An English country home, the perfect setting for two traditionally English machines, a soft-top sports car and a Range Rover style 4x4. The sports car was so wonderfully British that they even built it for James Bond. And the 4x4 came straight out of the expert's Land Rover stable. Only trouble is, they're not British at all, because both the Z8 and the X5 are German. They're from the men from Munich, BMW, who have this rather strange obsession with all things British. Who could forget the failed marriage with Rover? And now they're building the all-new Mini. But the one thing that BMW do very well is they build stonking machines. And when you put that badge on the front, you're guaranteed big success, which is why both the Z8 and the X5 have sold out their first 6 months' supply for Britain. Anyway, that's enough talking. Let's go and try the X5 first and see how much the men from BMW have learnt from the men from Land Rover. Cheeky, those Germans as well. They tried to pretend that they were pioneering something new with the X5 and called it the world's first sport activity vehicle. Forget all that. It's a posh 4x4. And they've taken the very best that Land Rover can offer them and then added their own extra dimension. And that is the engine and the on-road handling. This is like no other 4x4. 4.4 litre engine V8, 0 to 62 in 7.5 seconds, top of nearly 130 miles an hour. That's express saloon car work, and that's exactly what this is, because that is the big difference between the X5 and just about anything else on the road. It handles like a saloon car, but it's a 4x4. It's called having the best of all worlds. The interior really is classic BMW with that little bit extra. The X5 has got a real top drawer feel to everything you touch, and it somehow feels just that bit more substantial and that little bit different to the normal 5 Series and 7 Series. You get an awful lot of enjoyment out of this car, which is something you don't normally associate with 4x4s. They're big, they're solid, they look imposing, but they're normally a pain to drive. This is definitely not a pain to drive. It's got definite X credentials. This is the first time I've actually road tested a 4x4 and not gone off-road. That's because the majority of owners of the X5 will never venture anywhere more demanding than a twisty country road. That said, I did take it off-road in America, and it's perfectly adequate. As for the normal situation that you would think of with 4x4s of being a little bit basic, forget that as well. Inside here, you've got limo style luxuries, you've got all the gadgets you can imagine, navigational system, best CD player you can find, leather seats, nice touches of aluminium all around the dash. It is a thoroughly pleasant place to travel in. And that's not only from a sitting and comfort point of view, but also from a point of view of just enjoying yourself when you're driving hard. And the price? $44,670, which is Range Rover territory. But then the X5 is very definitely a worthy rival. You've got to hand it to them. They're clever, these Germans, very clever. They would appear to have learned an awful lot from Land Rover and then added their own touch of driving excellence. This really is a formidable machine. But I've had enough of being the landed gentry. I think it's time for a rather large change of character. Time for me to become Mr. James Bond. I think this looks more the part. Now, let's go and see why old James got so excited about this black beast. thought the Batmobile exterior was impressive, take a look at this. Clever little thing here, they have all of the dials slightly to your right, beautiful for the eye line here, in a sort of motorcycle style cowling, and in front of you you've got no distractions. The Z8 will set you back a hefty £80,000, and that's an awful lot of dough. But you do become a member of a rather exclusive club, because BMW intends selling just 60 in the UK next year. And of course, underneath the bonnet is where it's all really happening. There we have a 5-litre V8 engine with which James Bond can leave his passengers decidedly shaken and stirred, especially when you actually switch the sport mode button, which really gives you lift off. And that engine gives you supercar performance. We're talking 0 to 62 mile an hour in 4.7 seconds and on to a limited top speed of 155. That's fast enough for even James to get away from all those baddies. It definitely looks the part. The Z8 is like a cross between the Batmobile and an angry shark. I like the raw sports car feel with the bare colour-coded metal and the bright leather seats. And once you've slipped into the Z8, it's like being cocooned in the lap of sporting luxury. Well, it's been an absolutely superb day driving Germany's finest, but it's decision time. Which one to have? The Z8 or the X5? Well, I'm afraid there's no real choice. This is, after all, the very first day where the sun has shone in England for I don't know how many months. And let's face it, I was born to be James Bond, and now I've got the car.
Time for a break now, but stay tuned because we'll be right back with Ian Royle and his used car tip of the week, and we'll bring you the super hot Subaru Impreza. See you in part 2. Welcome back to Motor Week. Keep watching because Richard Hammond will be driving the new Impreza Turbo, and we'll be having a sneaky look at Peugeot's 307. But before that, let's see what Ian Royle's used car tip of the week is.
It's always been a bit of a surprise to me that Honda have not sold millions and millions and millions of cars in this country because, quite frankly, they ought to do. Their cars are brilliantly built, solid, reliable, hold their value well, and are capable of going on and on and on. Yet Honda's sales figures in this country are, well, okay-ish. And this week on Motor Week we look at, well, the NSX apart, the rarest Honda on our roads, the CRX. So what does a CRX look like? Well, this. It's basically a two-door coupe version of the popular Civic. So it's small, lightweight and nimble, and quite a rare sight. Existing owners don't like parting with their CRXs. This is a 1992 J-Reg CRX and it's done about 35,000 miles. When this car was new, it cost about £15,000, so not exactly a cheap motor. And it's not particularly cheap now either. £5,500 you'd have to pay for this 8-year-old example. There are 3 different CRXs to look out for. There's the fixed head coupe, there's this, which is the Targa roof, and there's also a version with an electric Targa roof. Now we recommend you don't go for the electric Targa roof version simply because it took about 20 different electric motors to make the roof work, and inevitably they used to go wrong from time to time, and that's just going to cost you money. Specification on the CRX is pretty good. It includes power steering, air conditioning and electric windows and mirrors. It's strictly a 2-seater though, with not much room in the car or the boot. Early CRXs built before 1992 were 2+2s, but even then hardly roomy. On later cars you had the choice of 2 1.6 engines with either 125 brake horsepower or the VTEC with nearly 160 brake horsepower. the way, don't confuse the CRX with the Civic Coupes, because they're not only vastly different in looks but also in the way that they drive. I suppose what Honda were trying to do with this CRX is emulate Toyota and their MR2. However, to be perfectly honest, it didn't quite pay off for them. You do sit very low in this car though, it's very grippy and it almost feels a bit like driving a go-kart, and it's quick. The 1.6 VTEC engine will get you to 60 in 8 seconds and onto a top speed of 132 miles an hour. The less powerful 1.6 engine is only slightly slower in the sprint, taking 9.2 seconds and a maximum of 119 miles per hour. Prices at the moment are stable, and cars are generally to be found in private sales rather than on main dealer forecourts. A 1993 K-Reg VTEC with 75,000 miles still sets you back £4,500. A 95 N-Reg Targa Auto with 55,000 miles on the clock looks costly at £7,300. So the Honda CRX, whilst hardly being drop-dead gorgeous, is a solid investment. Depreciation is low, it's nippy, it's easy to drive, and it's quite a rare sight on our roads, and that's why we like them. And that's this week's used car tip, the Honda CRX.
When each of my younger brothers started the school that I'd already been attending for some time, they were greeted by their teachers with frustrated and desperate cries of, "No, another Hammond!" Which, oddly enough, is the exact opposite of the problem facing the new Subaru Impreza, because its older brother was a right swap, good at everything, including sport. When it came to the exterior of the new Impreza, those folks at Subaru obviously decided they needed to keep a recognisable shape, so at first glance, not that different. Look a little closer and things like the new big wide-eyed headlamps start to make it look rather different, and if anything, slightly less aggressive, a little bit more maybe Euro-friendly. Subaru will tell you that despite it not looking that different, the Impreza is now about 200% stiffer through the chassis. Incredible, and I don't know how they did it. The net result is it's certainly not exactly a sloppy drive, but you'll notice straight away it is not an old Impreza. It does feel a bit bigger, a bit more grown up. Still got a huge amount of mid-range grunt from that lovely flat 4 engine, and it still sounds gorgeous. And it is still a very fast car. That 4-wheel drive, you can tell that has not been derived from a shopping car, put it this way. I just feel so sorry for the poor bloke or woman who was sat down in a corner of an office somewhere and said, "Oh, here you go, just design us a new Impreza, will you? Follow that." Can't have been easy. And they were faced with a stark choice. They could have gone down either the just brash performance route, as maybe it was going, or decided to compromise it a little bit, make it a bit more comfortable, for the simple fact it would pick up more sales. But to do that, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder to keep an eye on what the competition is doing. I just realised I forgot the shopping. Better go round again, eh? Tally ho. A bit more friendly it might be, a bit more comfortable it might be, but it is still a performance car, every bit. In actual fact, the Impreza has always made a lot of sense, but its extra performance edge has maybe scared a few people off in the past. Now though, with its extra bias in favour of comfort, the few people that it will lose because they favour pure performance, it will gain many times over, with customers who realise the Impreza Turbo really is nothing to be scared of.
Well, here's a car that'll soon be seen on all the sand dunes of Britain. It's the new Peugeot 307. Oh dear, you say, just a tarted up 306, but no. This is all new and bigger and far better than the ageing 306. It'll come to the UK this summer, and it really is, on first looks, a far better proposition than its predecessor. despite the much needed size improvements which rear passengers will appreciate, is not as heavy thanks to using an aluminium body and composite front panels. Inside, well, it really has a touch of luxury about it, and you peer out through a vast windscreen akin more to a mini MPV. Peugeot went to a lot of trouble to get the visibility right with the 307, and inside you do get a feeling of airy spaciousness without pesky pillars getting too much in the way of your driving. 3- and 5-door hatchbacks will be offered first in the range, and this body in silver looks absolutely gorgeous. In fact, take a look at this shot. Doesn't it remind you of an Audi A3? Well, this is just the sector Peugeot is aiming at. PSA, who own both Peugeot and Citroën, want to make Peugeot enjoy more upmarket executive appeal, while Citroën is to be aimed at good value family motoring. Families will not reject this 307 offering, however. It's plenty practical for shopping, kids and all the stuff you need to carry around. Plus, everyone will be able to personalise their interiors with a choice of wood or aluminium finish, and 2 seat fabrics as well with the new Peugeot 307. But it's on the road it's where you'll notice the new refinement and road manners, which are far better than the old 306. It's got a hard job to convince the potential Focus, Golf and Astra owners, however, and it's an even harder job if it is to crack the Audi A3 or Alfa 147 customer base.
Tune in next week when we'll be looking at the latest offerings from Citroën and Mercedes, and Richard Hammond looks at this, the latest Astra SXi.